Welcome back, everyone. We're on to our third and final guest today, and it's Reid Maxwell here from Coquitlam, British Columbia. And in truth, he's a neighbor of mine, not far away. So we'll bring him in shortly. First, I just want to make a comment on Reid. When I think of Reid Maxwell, two words come to mind for me. One is determination. This guy has been at it for a long time, and the determination does not seem to wane, which is pretty interesting. And the second one would be enthusiasm. Always enthusiasm for the band, for the music. These two words for me have taken him a long ways, these two characteristics. Neil, you go back a long ways as well with Reid. Any initial comment?
We didn't know each other in Scotland, although we competed against each other. And I played in Red Hackle. He was in Dysart. And
Sure.
we didn't like each other. I remember one time in Stirling, we played the Dysart boys in a football game at Bridge of Allen. We took our kilts off and had shorts on, but we're playing in ghillie brogues and stuff. It was one of the most vicious soccer matches I've ever been involved in.
Well, those Fifers are scrappers. It's
Yeah.
real football. Yeah. You probably know him more from the concert sort of stage onwards, right? A lot of activity.
I remember our first big concert at Carnegie Hall, where Reid almost got the thing shut down by the union went on strike. Remember that?
Yes. Yes.
He moved some drums, and then the union leader came in and said, "You can't move anything on the stage, and until you fix it." And Reid was saying, "Well, they're my drums." Or so. We should ask him about that when he comes on.
It got heated. Man. It did get heated, but we got past it.
Yeah.
Into one of our big moments. Let's welcome in Reid Maxwell now, if we can. He's coming. There you go, Reid. How we doing?
Good, thanks.
You remember that Carnegie moment, Reid?
Oh, I remember Carnegie Hall for multiple of things. I'm always intrigued because it's probably one of the most asked questions you get. Oh, you guys played Carnegie Hall. I would absolutely say that of all the numerous concerts I've done with the SFU pipe band, while it was great to be on the stage at Carnegie Hall and play, I thought that was the worst. I wouldn't say worst. It was my least favorite concert that we ever done. And that was really because the people there were insufferable to work with. They made it difficult for us from the outset. And, it is what it is to be. I'm glad the band done it, and we had a great, a great recording that captured the great playing and all the selection of music. But I always reflect back on that was definitely my least enjoyable night. Didn't like it.
So I guess Carnegie Hall, the sequel, is not going to happen now. Eh? Hey, I've got a story about Carnegie Hall I wanted to share with you guys. I stood my ground on something too, but emceeing, I never liked having a wired mic, and I didn't like the little collar thing. So we had requested in the setup that we have a wireless mic, and they didn't do it. They just brought it, and they said, well, everybody uses this with the big cord. And I said, well, drummers and pipers are going to trip over it. No, I need a mic wireless. Well, the union guys wouldn't do it. And then the stage manager lady who I'd made friends with in order for us to get past the union fight that Reid had caused, came to me in the dressing room and she said, listen, I got you a wireless mic. And she has this box and lifted it open, and it was a microphone in a velvet thing. And she said, you can use this for this concert. And I said, is it the only one you've got? And she said, it's Frank's mic. So nobody knows that. I used Frank Sinatra's personal mic for the Carnegie Hall concert.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, Reid, these are 4 charity interviews that we do. And you've nominated a charity from Vancouver today, which is the Downtown Eastside Neighborhood House. Can you tell us anything about that charity, please? What kind of work they do?
Yeah, they're located in the downtown Eastside, and they provide food of a really nutritious variety for homeless people and Indigenous people and people just who need a little bit of help down there. And so I go through that area quite a lot on a regular basis, and I'd like to see a little bit more help going in their direction. Yeah.
Well, that's great. We will put the link up on the video for that charity. That's great stuff. Can you tell us anything about your family? Who lives there with you? Tell us about your kids. Tell us who is in your family?
Well, there's just Rachel and I live here in this little house here. That's, as you mentioned, we're neighbours. We can actually testify to the fact that we live probably less than 100 metres away from each other. Terry's back window to his house looks out onto Porter Elementary School, and if you open the front door of my house, it looks right into that same playground at Porter Elementary School. Terry faces north, I face east. So yeah, just living here. I live in Coquitlam, BC. My youngest son lives in Surrey. He's only about 30 minutes away with my 2 grandchildren. And my oldest son lives in Maple, which is just to the very north of the Toronto area, with his wife and his son there. So, yeah.
And tell us how you're staying busy these days, and are you taking new students on and this sort of thing? How's that going for you?
Not going really busy. I would say that I returned from my trip from New Zealand in very early February. So it was a few weeks out before all the COVID-19 lockdown and all that started, and I was quite busy when I got back. And I would say that since the whole COVID-19 lockdown started, I've been busier. So on a week-to-week basis, I'm busier seeing more students. And I had one student who cut back from a lesson every week to a lesson every other week. And the people that I was teaching down in New Zealand, because they were unable to get to the same location, I stopped teaching them for about 10 weeks in total, but I just started back up with them. In fact, I have my second session with them coming up on Tuesday night. And one of my students, his mum and dad, who have not been affected by the COVID lockdown at all, asked if I could teach their son twice a week instead of once a week, because they were looking for things for him to do and keep him engaged in that. So it's been busy. I've been busy with this. I've done an online workshop with my very good friends Stephen McQuarter, Eric McNeil, Andrew Elliott, and Christina Hanks. We did one at the end of April that was quite successful. We had 68 people from 5 countries. That was really good. And I'm getting ready for a couple of summer schools. I'm doing a little bit of work for Ian McDonald's school at Sound Advice in Regina, and then my own school that I run with Jack Lee, which is coming up starting July the 12th. For a whole week, piping hot summer drummer worldwide. So we're very excited and looking forward to that for sure.
Good stuff. Now, Reid, if we look at your pipe band career, one could say you had a good run pre-SFU, but then you had the SFU run, which is now well over 25 years. You got to say, 25 plus years running the SFU core successfully. What keeps you going at the end of the day?
I love to play drums, and obviously I've been here longer than anything. I've lived almost half my life in British Columbia now, and certainly if you add up the years that I've played in previous bands, which would have been mainly Dice and Dundalk and the 78 Fraser Highlanders, the years spent at SFU have far surpassed that. I like it here a lot. It would be fair to say that becoming very good friends with yourself and having a really good working relationship with you, Jack, Robbie, and all the things that means to the band and to myself. It was a natural fit, a really good fit. It was a place where I could do all the things I wanted and have a lot of fun living in a really cool place. And so, yeah, I like it.
Good stuff. We're heading towards a video clip that you thankfully did for us. It's a couple of 2/4 marches, you on a drum pad, I believe, and Alistair Lee playing small pipes, joining you. Can you tell us what the tunes were in that piece?
Yeah, there's 2/4 marches. The first one is a piece called The Australian Ladies, and the second piece is a march called Arthur Bignald of Loch Rosk. I was somewhat inspired by Stuart Little's performance on your show 2 or 3 weeks ago when he chose a couple of 2/4 marches, and just so good to hear that kind of thing. So I wanted also to choose something that wouldn't necessarily require that I play on a snare drum, and that you would not be able to find me playing anywhere on social media, anywhere, YouTube, Facebook, anything, you name it. and I wanted to do something a little bit different. So it was picking a couple of tunes that didn't start the way you would expect them to start. No three-pace rolls. Didn't quite finish the way that the music suggested that you would finish the second one. And kind of they're great tunes that, unfortunately, because of the confines of competition, that you never hear the great pipe bands play anymore. They're like Australian Ladies. I played Australian Ladies in 1980 at the World Pipe Band Championships as a member of the Dies and Dundonald Pipe Band. That's when James King was the lead drummer. And one of the ironic things that I always remember about the Australian Ladies score, where it's a few years old now, about 4 or 5 years old, is that the day I penned it and put it to good copy was the very same day I got a phone call from Scotland from friends to tell me that James King had passed away after a battle with cancer. So I have a really special attachment to that score now, even more so than I ever did before. And the other march, Arthur Bignell of Loch Ross, I've just always thought, what a great tune. What an absolutely great tune. And the sad thing about that is we might never, ever, ever hear that played in the Grade 1 arena ever again. I don't think it's ever been played in Grade 1. Going back to my first year in 1973 would have been my first Worlds, but in Grade 175, I don't recall a band ever playing that in Grade 1. And it's a shame.
No, it is a
I
shame.
wonder if 78's played it one year, maybe after you left. I thought they did.
No?
Somebody,
you know what? You could be right, Neil.
Terry, text Bill Livingston and ask him.
I'll get right on that. But
just two great tunes.
That's a good example of why there perhaps could be a set tunes list for even one of the MSRs that you put forward as a Grade 1 band. You know what I mean? That you have to play from a set tunes list, which would introduce all these great classics that sometimes we view as a little bit maybe light, by certain competitive standards. And it would be a good way of getting these classics in there. But I digress slightly. So anyway, good to hear these tunes. Thank you for doing it. And let's take a look and listen to that video now.
Welcome back, Reid. That was really interesting. That was quite a nice take on two. I think they're classic marches, and I agree with you. And I was going to ask you this at the end, but we may as well get into it right off the top, because we talked to Stephen McWhirter about the idea of changing some of the format of the March of Spain Reel competitions, especially in the championships. And we've all sort of arrived at the same sort of idea that why not have the Grade 1 bands play from a set list over the course of 2, 3, 4 years, whatever. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that would be a good thing for pipe bands in general?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the immediate spin-offs I would see on something like that would be, for example, a lot of bands in the Grade 2 and the Grade 3 often try to emulate what they can based on what the Grade 1 bands are doing. And so you see a lot of duplication of the same tunes in Grade 2 and in Grade 3. And I just wonder what would happen if some classic tunes of 4 parts in length, whether it be marches, strathspeys, or reels. I mean, those little marches I played are just sort of the tip of the iceberg, really, because I mean, look how many great, fabulous 4-parted reels there are. In fact, there's another thing. I can remember several bands in the last few years, for sure, playing 4-parted marches in their MSR, but I can't recall a prize-winning band playing a 4-parted reel in the longest time. I don't know when the last time a band might have played a 4-parted reel in the MSR at Grade 1 in the final or even the qualifier.
I'm with you there. Here's the other thing I thought. If you went to a set tune thing and you had to do a new MSR in the year with the outside the big 6-parters and all that stuff, that would mean lead drummers would have to write new scores, wouldn't it? Because if you're doing Lord Alex year after year or every second year, you're pretty much rehashing the same score from before. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I have a score that I wrote for Lord Alexander Kennedy in October of 1992 when I was getting ready to come up for my first trip to Vancouver to rehearse with the band. And it's pretty much exactly what we still play. But it would be great to play other tunes. I think I have a library of about 40 scores that would cover 2-4 marches of various ilk, in terms of degree of difficulty. And there's some classic tunes in there, and the same with reels. Like, for example, maybe all the bands that when you do the old qualifier thing on a Friday at the World Pipe Band Championships, or if you wanted to change up the World Pipe Band Championships based on how it was presented in 2019, which meant that all 4 competition circles you had to play, and they all counted towards the overall result. Maybe, for example, the Friday could be MSR, 4 parts only, all 3 tunes. You could only play 4-parted tunes on the Friday, whether it be the qualifier or whether it was going to count. Now, the other thing about that is it would make for a shorter event because it wouldn't take quite as long, which from an organization standpoint might be also good, and also from a band perspective, not having to be out there so long. I've always thought that, tongue-in-cheek, that on a rainy day, on the World's Qualifier Day on the Friday, you should have a wee 4-parted MSR up your sleeve that you could just walk up and hope that you could play it really well and minimize the time that you're out in the bad weather, But anyway.
I want to just touch back on this thing. You said you tweaked or you used a 1992 score over the course of the many years. Is that because, like, a tune like Highland Wedding or links or forth or whatever. When you're writing a score for it, you think this is what fits this tune, and there's no point writing another one. Is it like the notes in the bagpipe music? Is once it's set to paper and you've created it, that's the only one that fits, or could you write another score for a Lord Alex?
No, I couldn't. I would be hard pressed to come up with something for some of those big tunes, as we call it. Like the Tom McAllister, Lord Alexander Kennedy, Highland Wedding, Balmoral Highlanders, that type of thing. I mean, when you pour an effort into a score like that, it takes forever to get the right score for that. Now, in the years that's gone by, you could say that 95% of that score for Lord Alexander Kennedy exists as it was from '92, and there's been the odd little tweak that I would say maybe comes. I'd like to think it comes from maturity, in terms of this could maybe go just a wee bit nicer here, but it's very minimal. I mean, you could probably try and write something different if you wanted to, just for the sake of being different. But I don't necessarily think that. I think that I think as in the drumming world, and certainly myself, I'm quite comfortable with scores lasting now the test of time. I don't think that's I don't see that as a negative thing. I think that's quite a good thing. I mean, it's not uncommon to hear scores penned by the great Alec Duthart from the late 60s and 70s still played at the highest level, and at the World Solo Drumming Championships, for example, and bits of his stuff still coming through in some of the classic tunes. If it would be like a Maggie Cameron, the Cameronian Rant, things like that. So I think that kind of stuff is okay.
All right, so I want to jump topics here for a minute, because we just finished a session with Tyler Fry, who's famous for having branded his work and himself. And I'm looking at you. You're doing the SFU thing. You're teaching. You've got some clinics going. Are any merchandise like JR, like sticks, anything like that going on with you?
Yeah. I'm just getting ready to release a stick again through Andante Drums in Northern Ireland. I had been with them several years ago, and then switched stick maker. And I've just decided last year to make the switch back to Andante. They would have been out and on the market now, but with all this stuff going on, we've just got a whole bunch of stuff on hold. So as soon as things get opened up, then I guess you could say we're hoping for a successful launch of product that will take place prior to the 2021 season. So probably we're sometime around about Easter of 2021, I'm hoping that will all be ready to go.
I wonder if it's going to be called the JR. Not many people know this, that the J. Reid Maxwell, the J is for Jessica, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I thought that a trademark thing for you that you could sell worldwide is that bloody orange baseball cap you wear all the time. Just get a JR on it, or a Jara or something. That's your lucky hat, isn't it?
Well, I have several. Some people think I have the same hat, but I don't. Although if I go to the Worlds, for example, I'll throw half a dozen orange baseball caps of different things on them. I have a little thing that every year you start with a new cap, so you have to get a new cap in place for the start of the pipe band season, and you keep that cap, and you only wear it on Saturdays when you've got your kilt. And if you do really well in August, you keep that hat for the second year, and you run the luck as long as it will last. And if you don't have a good August, you get a new one and try again.
You wear it off the bus, right through the tuning park, right up to the line. I remember Terry saying, "Put on your bloody Glengarry."
Yeah, it's on first thing in the morning, and it stays with me all the time unless I've got my Glengarry on.
All right. I'm going to talk about your life in SFU. We're going to get to that in a minute, but let's talk. You've mentioned Dyson Dundonald before and James King. was James an instructor of yours? Like, where did your instruction begin? And then talk about going in. Were you in Ballingery School, or did you go right into Dyser?
No, I started in Ballingery School when I was a wee guy. I went up to Dundonald, what they called the Dundonald Institute, which would have been a miners' welfare institute kind of place that you would know from Scotland. Every wee place has it.
What age? What age?
I was maybe about 7 when I first went, and then I went for a wee while, and then I stopped going because I got quite sick as a youngster and didn't end up doing very much for about a spell of 6 months. And then a little bit later on, I went back to the band. So I was probably 8, 9 years old when I went back, and then I started taking lessons at the band at that time. Now, James King was the lead drummer of the Dyser and Dundonald Pipe Band at that time, but the guy who did all the instruction was a guy called William Bell, or Willie Bell, as we all know him, you know. And he spent countless hours working with not just myself but other kids. When I stayed at my granny's.
Was he of? Sorry, Reid. Was he of the shepherd style of teaching? Was he like a strict disciplinarian, or was he like let you have your free rein?
He was quite demanding. I wouldn't necessarily say strict, if you know what I mean, but he was really demanding of, come on, you can do this. Come on, let's try it again. And if things weren't going well, you know, it would be like, right, we'll have an extra practice over at my house, you know, on Thursday night or something like that for an hour and that kind of thing. So he was really demanding. He asked a lot of you, all of us young guys as players. So he was the guy that did all the teaching. James was the guy who was the lead drummer of the Grade 1 band, and he run the Grade 1 band. And basically, Willie Bell, you could say, produced the players that went into that corps. And
so it was a feeder system, kind of like a football club type of thing. Where you had your juniors, and then you would graduate. So would Jim come down and have a look at who was doing well in the junior band?
No, I think.
Or was it Willie that recommended people to graduate?
Absolutely, Willie would recommend that it was time to move them up and stuff like that. So
what age were you when you first went into Grade 1?
My first competition season in Grade 1 was 1975. I was 14 years of age at that time. So I joined the band when I was 13, because I joined the band permanently in sort of September of 94. Played my first Worlds in 75 down in Corby, England, of all places.
I was there. That was right before we went to the Intercontinental, or whatever you call it, in Toronto.
Yeah.
So you were on the same plane as me.
There you go. All those years ago. Who knew it?
Did you go over to the Ponderosa for the $3 T-bone steaks? You remember that?
I would have to say yes.
That was fascinating to us. I was a teenager then too, and we used to do the tattoo at the CNE, and then we'd come back to York University at like 11 o'clock at night, and we'd troop. All these pipe band guys would walk across the road to the Ponderosa, and it was like all you could eat for like $5. It was fantastic. And for us, these steaks were like this, but for us Scottish guys, that was like we were in Texas, man. It was brilliant.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're in Dyser, and I know I knew you by the time you came to Canada and working with 78s and NSFU, of course. But I'm wondering, in your Dyser years, when and how did you develop your sensibility for ensemble? Because in my mind, you're one of the great writers of drum scores that absolutely complements everything that's going on in the pipe band music. You and Kilpatrick are the two guys that I remember the most, because I grew up with you both, and I'm sure there are many other drummers that are good at it now too. But you seem to have been one of the leaders of that idea that ensemble is as important as rudimentary technique. Did that come from Dyser?
Yeah, I would say that it was also the big driving force behind that was Bob Shepherd. Bob couldn't play drums, but he knew what he wanted from the drummers, and he was very demanding and stuff like that. And so a couple of things, I always remember him saying this, and I was reminded about it by a recent BBC broadcast that had aired after his passing just last year. And that was that music is something that goes forward, and you should be driving it forward all the time. It kind of, it speaks to how I think, like the bar lines are only there to make sure everything adds up mathematically, but they've got nothing at all to do with the music. And so he was very good at that. The other thing as well is at times it was okay to be simple.
Yeah.
You know, like it didn't have to be complex to be right, and you could you know, you could be simplistic at times if it was making the point. And I've always kind of held that dear, that to how I put stuff together. I don't care if it's you know, simple. I mean, I always say to people, well, what's not simple? What's complicated? You know, like I can make something awkward. So does that make it complicated because it's awkward? Or because you put a little bit of thought into how effortless it is to play it, does that then make it simple? You know, I've always thought that you just kind of go with it. I mean, I've been around as long as you have, although we haven't competed in the last few years. But I mean, one of the things that's kind of flattering amongst the younger guys in my corps, well, they'll say, "Come on, JR, play some of that old school stuff in that some of the scores, you know, or can we go back to that old school thing it used to do in the 7th, 8th with those big rolls and the slow air or something like that." And they genuinely want that. And so I try to remember that kind of thing is still current, because people are still liking it and still listening to it and still wanting it. And it's okay to go back and see what you've done in the past and sort of bring it back again. You know, I've always thought that's always been like a totally okay thing to do.
Both of your points is, I don't know how widely it is known, but one of my great friends in bagpiping was Bob Shepherd, and I learned so much from him because, and I don't know, well, I think now he gets his due, but he was such a guy for pushing the envelope and demanding more, and like being quite vocal about what he thought pipe band should be about. And in all my discussions with him and stuff, when I started writing, I was talking to him about exactly what you mentioned about the bars being just kind of guidelines. And I often thought that people use music on the page the way like a drunk uses a lamppost, like more for support than illumination, right? and the music's really a guideline. And I've always thought, I always wanted people to play to the front of the beat. And I know many pipe majors in your life probably saying, "Oh, coffee, you're too fast," right? I'm sorry, I threw in coffee there. Was that Bob Shepherd nickname that he gave you?
Actually, I had that long before I came to the band, but it's a name. It's a name that's stuck forever. I always
called you.
You can always know people who know me from a way back because they'll always say that, because a lot of people probably didn't even know my first name. They probably never knew my name at all, and they would never have called me it, you know?
Yeah, Bob always called you coffee. The other thing you talked about was the simplicity of ensemble. And I learned from Bob that one of the most tasteful things you can do in a pipe band is, like an artist using white space, is for a pipe band to use silence or gaps. And you constantly do that. There's elements in, like, where you go to nothing, you know. And we've got a clip coming up that exemplifies that. I want you to speak to this. There's two different types of breaks that we're going to see in this clip with SFU, right? From two different medleys, 2005 and 2009, I think. Oh no, 1995 and 2009. One using the pipe band taking the break, and the other one using the drums taking the break, is the pipers as opposed to the drummers. So talk about what was coming up here.
Well, there are sort of two examples of tension that are done in completely the opposite way. So in the 1995 medley that the band played, 1995 medley, we had the break where we went from the second to last reel into the last reel. It was called Back of the Moon. And as the pipers came out, they held the last note of the reel for a 4 count. And while they held that note with harmony, the drummers continued to play a bridge that was really an introduction to the finale. And so what you've got there is pipers doing really nothing, except although holding a note for four beats.
Is it Back of the Moon? Holding a D for 4 beats. That's very hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. So they're doing that while we're going absolutely crazy and introducing the last piece, and then bang, the whole band goes in on the first note of the tune. And then the other one is something that would be completely different, where in the 2009 medley, where we came out of the space, and right on the first note of the Mrs. MacLeod de Rassi, the entire drum corps comes to a complete stand, bang. And then you've got the pipers playing for almost 4 bars. And then right at the very end of the 4th bar, there's a little tiny anacousis by the drum corps. And then away you go. The whole band's in, starting on the 2nd line. So you've got one where the drum corps really do nothing and getting heaps of praise. And you've got the other one where they're doing everything and the pipers are getting as much praise as they are. So I always find that that's really cool to be able to do stuff like that, because they have you on the edge of your seat wanting to know what you're going to do next. And that's the whole idea of it, is when are they going to come in, you know?
Well, let's have a look at that clip right now, and then we'll come back and we'll have a wee more chat after. All right?
Sounds good.
All right, that was very interesting to see those things in isolation. Often listeners don't notice that when you listen to the whole body of a medley, but to isolate it, I know in the preparation how much work goes into just that 6-bar interlude. How are we going to do this and stuff? So I want you to talk now about your graduation from being a core drummer. Oh, before that, as a core drummer or a lead drummer, you've won the World Pipe Band Championship drumming sash. Not yourself, because you played with Jim King, but you've been the lead drummer or a member of how many World Championship drum corps?
9 times in total.
Yeah. 9 and counting, right?
Well, yeah. 9's a good number. If it ever goes to 10,
how many of those sashes?
I won't say no.
How many of those sashes you got as a lead drummer?
5. 1 with the 78 Fraser Highlanders in '87, and 4 with SFU.
All right. So you come as a blossoming teenager or a 20-year-old? How old were you? You come to Canada to the 78?
I immigrated when I was 20, and I had turned 21 in the January of 1982, which was my first season with the 78th. I think I joined the band sort of late March, early April. So,
how did that come about? I'm always interested in how people leave their country of birth to begin a new life, especially at such a young age. I did it when I was 18, and you're at 20. I mean, it's absolutely, I couldn't imagine my kids doing that at that age. But my mum, I wrote a letter and said, send me my albums and my jeans. Right, I'm staying in Canada. So how did it come about? Did Bill approach you, or was it other people? What was involved?
No, it was my first wife was a Canadian from Toronto, and so we immigrated. I immigrated here. For her, it was moving home, and my oldest boy was 2 days shy of his very first birthday when we moved. And
you had no pipe band in your mind? You weren't thinking of pipe bands?
Well, I knew that I knew that I wanted to join a pipe band, and I was quite happy to join any pipe band as long as they gave me an opportunity to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to do my own thing, and one person I knew quite well at the time when I immigrated was a guy called Ronnie Rollo from Toronto.
Bruce Gandy talked about him a lot. Ronnie Rollo's influenced so many people in the piping world.
Yeah, and Ronnie was a friend before I moved, because he used to come over to the Dysart practices when we were kids, or when I was a kid, which I still was when I immigrated, to be honest. And so I knew Ronnie, and Ronnie was a piper in the 78 Fraser Highlanders at that time, and they were trying to get some things moving in a more positive direction. They felt that they needed to improve things at the back end, and through Ronnie, I very quickly met a guy called Michael Gray, and everybody will know Michael. Great composer, very much a big part of the music of the 78 Fraser Highlanders, him and Bruce Gandy, whose name you just mentioned. So I've remained very good friends with Michael since that. And Michael, I think basically Michael talked Bill Livingston into getting me to come into the band because he thought it would be a good thing. And then Bill went along with that eventually. And after the first year of sort of doing things, sort of kind of thrown together a little bit, I was sort of appointed the full-time lead drummer of the 78 Fraser Highlanders in the fall of 1982. And then, so my first Worlds as a lead drummer would have been the 83 Worlds at Bellahouston Park. And then that was the first time that the 78th went to the Worlds. And then it was something that we did every year. I played in the band.
1982. You realize that's 38 years ago.
We're not.
Okay, so you come in, you take over the lead role, and you were youthful and not much experience of being a lead drummer. It must have been like a gift from heaven to fall into that with guys. Like, I can't think of anyone in the pipe band realm as musical at that time as Bill Livingston, and then the people he surrounded himself with, like John Walsh, Bruce Gandy, Michael Gray, Jake Watson, but these incredible talents, were they all at the beginning of the band then?
Yeah. Michael had just joined the band before I got there. Bruce Gandy, actually, I think Bruce played, I think 83 was his first year with the band, because he had moved from Victoria to Ontario. So I joined the band just before Bruce. John Walsh was already there when I joined the band. And what was really exciting about us was the music was exciting. I mean, like, for example, I get to the 78th Fraser Highlanders. I had never heard a round reel.
And at the speed that you like to play at.
I'd heard that. And it's like, whoa. And so I remember asking Bill Livy, says it, what do you mean it's a round reel? He says, there's no dots and guts. Oh, beautiful. Let's go. That was sort of the end of the education. It just made so much sense,
So now, in those years, would Bill come to you with a complete package of music, or did you have any sort of contribution to saying, oh, I'd like to do this on the break, or here's how I think we could end? When did you start to contribute to the ensemble?
I would say that I started to get interested in tunes, suggesting the tunes, really towards the latter time in the band. I mean, I was really young and I was finding out about like crazy cool stuff, and so I always use this expression: make yourself as big a sponge as you can. And so what when I look back on it, I would say that I was trying to expand myself as a sponge without really actually realizing that that's what I was doing at the time. And so I really put down those years to trying to catch up and keep up with people who had lots of good ideas. I think that when it came to drumming, I would have ideas on breaks and dynamics and stuff like that as to how it could be applied. And if I could be so bold as to suggest that when the 78th were deciding what to play at the World Pipeline Championships in 1987, we had a medley in place that we actually recorded on the Live in Ireland album. And that was the album that was the medley that we were going to play. And about halfway through the season, we sort of hit a crossroads and wondered if the new medley was going to do the trick.
Is that the Fox Hunter one?
No, that was the old one. That was the old. We'd been playing the Fox Hunter medley as a medley since 19. So we debuted that medley in 85 and 86, and it was always our number 2 medley in 86, and then again in 87 it was going to be that. But it didn't start with Up to the Line. It started with the Slow Air, and then we broke into the Up to the Line and marched in and played.
You wouldn't be allowed to do that in Scotland.
No. So I remember saying to Bill and to Michael and Bruce at the pub, I said, I don't think that we need to do very much. I said, I think we've got a medley in place. If you take the medley up to the line, put Up to the Line in front, and then play the jigs, and then go to the Slow Air, and then play the Strathspey and Reel. If you can figure out how to do that, then you've got the medley. And we can play all those tunes because we've been playing them for such a long time that they were like sort of autopilots. So the next band practice, we're walking in, playing Up to the Line, breaking into some jigs, going into the Slow Air. The Strathspeys and Reels, my apologies, breaking into Strathspeys and Reels, Slow Air, and then from there going into a whole selection of jigs that ended up in that sort of iconic idea of playing waltzes. Oh my goodness, a waltz, 3/4, and you tap it fast,
I'm pushing towards the end here, but before we leave 78, I want to talk briefly about one of the, in my mind, and in many other people's minds, one of the best scored piece of pipe band music ever, and that's the Journey to Skye. Were you just given free license to do whatever the hell you wanted there?
Yeah.
I mean, that must be like candy to a baby for you then, because I just like everything. It just and It all worked seamlessly, I thought, and it still stands the test of time as one of the most iconic pieces of pipe band music ever.
Yeah.
So,
and it's
listen,
and Neil, it's all simple stuff. It's not really like the simplicity of how it builds with the tenor cadence coming in just in simple 6/8 time, and then in the bass joining in, and how the drumming is.
It's almost like you made the drum corps a drum kit. You know, it's I like that.
it's all quite simple rhythmic stuff, and it was written with more of a rhythmic delivery than a set trying to write to the melody. You know, so just don't get in the way, because the piece of music was brilliant. We loved it right from the get-go. We couldn't believe this really cool thing, you know.
So now, talking of icons, I had two things. I want to talk to you about some technical stuff, but we're going to run out of time for that. So I would be remiss, and anyone watching this would call us idiots if we didn't talk about one iconic thing for you to move into the next iconic era of pipe bands and start to work with one of the best pipe majors ever invented in Terry Lee. Like 25 years, that's quite a hell of a relationship. And you're probably the most blessed drummer on the planet. Bob Shepherd, Bill Livingston, Terry Lee, now Alan Bevan. I mean, it doesn't get better than that for an accompanying resume, does it?
No, fantastic. I think
Talk about starting with Terry and your relationship over the years.
Well, I think that I don't think we agreed on everything, and I think that that's healthy. But we agreed on a lot of stuff in terms of ideas, and if I had an idea and he didn't like it, he said, I like that, and that's fine. And we just left it there. And if he had an idea and I said, no, I don't like that, he would just leave it. And we never tried to force things on the band that one of us didn't think was a good idea. And I think that that was always a great thing. The truth be known, the only thing that we ever really never, ever agreed on, and I still bug him about this to this day, I never liked the Cosmos Cascade tune as an opener to that medley. And
that's one of the best medleys of all time, man.
He dropped the F-bomb on me. He says, go in, you know what, you know? He says,
you know what?
It's working.
Not because this is his show, but I'm telling you, he was right. You should, you don't blow a piss into the wind, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in SFU 25 years, and I'm thinking there is no way that there's anyone in the core now that started 25 years ago, right?
No.
You have done what Alec Ferguson did with Manchester United. You've rebuilt your team probably 4 or 5 times. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, but that, yeah.
So how does the flavour of your drum corps change through each of these transitions? Because I know from being inside it that your drum corps is way different now than it was when I played in the band. Stylistically.
I think that stylistically it's changed because I think I'm a better, well, it would be a bit brash to say that, I know, but I do truly believe that I'm a better musician now, all these years on, than when I first came to the band. But it's been a thing that's evolved. So if it didn't start the way it started, it wouldn't have been able to evolve the way it did. And so one of the things that has happened is that how I do things and how I go about things has evolved. Like, I was quite a tyrant in Ontario when it came to running core practices and stuff like that. And when I came to SFU, I decided that I wasn't going to do it that way. And while I can still be a bit of a tyrant on occasion when I'm just wanting to get things done,
I'm laughing because I'm sure that if I asked any of your drummers to describe you, the word gentle does not come to mind.
So, but I have enjoyed, and one of the things, again, going back to my Dysart days, Bob Shepherd and then, of course, Willie Bell, who taught me to play drums, they were always very big on making your own players. And you know, that way you always had a certain element of control. Because, for example, everybody that comes into the RMM program, only a few become good enough to play in the SFU pipe band. But if you have one every couple of years, then that's maybe all you need. You know what I mean? And then you get the odd year when you might have 2 or 3 because you've got a wee bit of a golden group, shall we say. And so you ride that and take it for what it's worth. And I've never, ever shied away from the fact that, you have to work hard. You have to work hard. It's not easy. And if you're going to teach, it's hard work. I love it. I mean, I was at 9 o'clock this morning when you guys were probably having your cornflakes. I was teaching the RMM grade 4 kids on Zoom and loving every second of it with them, and wondering if there's going to be one wee gem or more in that wee group that I'll probably not be around to play with in 8 years' time or whatever that number's going to be, but that will see the band nicely with their services that will last maybe, at least a good 10 years after they get in there. So
okay, so the very last thing I want to ask you about is, in your life in SFU, your contribution has not just been in drumming, but in the musical content. And you and I talked about this on the phone recently, but I remember one time we were going to a concert in Seattle and we're on a bus, and you said, I would love to have one tune that we play in like 5 different time signatures. And what do you think, Neil? We decided on the keel rock, and like a pretty simple least respect. And I wrote that, and by the time that bus journey was done, I had the music written and you had the score in your head. Like, other things like that happen to you all the way through SFU. Am I right? Like, you've come up with some idea of where to go.
Yeah, just I always say to people, if you listen to the band when they're working on a new medley in February, and then you don't hear them again until the week of the Worlds, you'll be thinking, what happened there? And that's kind of just how it's always been. You're kind of evolving stuff, and you keep an open mind. Terry and I think that was we always kept open minds on stuff, like, is this right? Should we try this? And just trying stuff and just seeing if we could get something a wee bit better. And sometimes you would have something, you would think, we can make it a wee bit better. You try it and it's terrible. And so what do? You just scrap it. You just move on. It's not sort of dwelling on anything. You just like, okay, well, let's give it a wee go. And sometimes you don't waste 30 minutes at practice. And I think that some people would think that was a waste of time. But you use that 30 minutes, you come to a conclusion. And then if it doesn't get used, then you've maybe got something that you'll put in your sort of back of your memory bank there, and maybe it will become something that helps you use for something else the next time or later on.
All right, here we go. Psychological test. You just answer these. Don't even think. Just say whatever, where the spirit leads you. Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Favorite James Bond?
Goldfinger.
Favorite James Bond actor? That'd be Sean Connery then.
Aye, would have to be him.
What's your favorite pub in Glasgow during the World's Week?
Park Bar.
Of all the SFU concerts you've done, what was your most memorable? What one did you enjoy the most? What you do again in a minute?
2001, Melbourne, Good Friday. I can't remember the actual date of that, but it was a great theatre. And
that wee theatre with the carpet?
Yes, it was like acoustically only made for pipe bands to play in. It was so good.
Fish supper or curry?
Fish supper.
If you go into Greg's Baker, what is it you're going to buy?
Sorry, again?
If you go into Greg's Bakery in Scotland, what are you going to buy?
Oh, vegan sausage roll.
All right, so finally, I want you to tell everybody that's watching this about your tradition in the morning of the Worlds.
Well, it's
be really brief because Terry's coming back.
Okay, so years ago when I got into the band, I used to think about when I was a kid and how my granny and my grandfather would always make sure that I left for the Worlds and pretty much every competition day with a good breakfast, so that it would stick with you. And a lot of times you couldn't get good food at competitions back in the day, and so I always had a wee sandwich made up and a little thermos to soup.
Oh yeah, and the food is gourmet nowadays at the World Cup.
So it just became something where we did the haggis and we got the eggs and the rolls and all that going. And in the last 3 years, I've sort of changed my own preference on food selection, in as much that I don't eat meat anymore. But the young guys in the band, mainly driven by my son Grant, who plays in the band, have kept the tradition going. So they'll be in the kitchen getting all the sausage, the bacon, the eggs, the haggis.
It's like at 5:30 in the morning, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, sometimes it started pretty early, and yeah, I think it's a good thing. It's always been a good thing to keep everybody's mind off the seriousness of what we're about to get into. And it's always, we've had some good laughs over it, I'd say.
Reid, sometimes there's been Piper's welcome there as well. I enjoyed having that several occasions.
It's not a
only if
shop.
you would
It's not
polish.
a shop.
Only if you would polish the drummer's gilly brogues. Listen, Reid, I want to thank you. It's been an absolute joy. I know we've had a lot of conversations over the years, but nothing like this. I really, I'm grateful for you contributing to this show. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys. Really enlightening. Lots of fun. So many things I could comment on. Let me just quickly say I enjoyed the trial and error process of tune selection with Reid Maxwell. I mean, it was never ending. I swear he woke up with ideas every day and would phone or come into the store or what have you.
It's like the angel Gideon came to him in his sleep and said, "Try this with us."
I know, and crazy, man.
It's your job.
Anyway, it was good. It was good. And just for the record, if people are going to say the Cosmos Cascade was one of the greatest medleys of all time, some people say that. I would concur that the Cosmos Cascade itself was not the most brilliant tune of all time. But as I said very succinctly without the F-bomb to Reid, I think that it was a means to an end to set up the brilliant key change to the second tune, the Snuff Wife. And so the package, it was all about the package. And took Reid a little while to see the wrapping of that package. But we got it together, and, you know, history is what it is.
Okay, talking about a real well put together package of music, you're going to introduce the last clip to your test.
Yes, I'm going to do that now. So that we asked our guests to nominate a favorite performance, and you know, I think Reid has a number of performances to choose from. But anyway, he chose the medley from 2019, last year's Worlds, and his band, the SFU, actually won the medley event that day. It's appropriately opened with As Good As It Gets. And Reid, just any comment on that particular sort of day or medley?
It was just fun. It was great. Really good to have a good run, had a good draw. The weather was kind of nice as well on the particular time when we played. And just a really good bunch of tunes. And then I think I was really kind of happy for Alan, because it was the first time the band had won a segment at the World Pipe Band Championships. He was the pipe major, and I kind of felt that was I was doing my bit for another pipe major who got a chance to get a little taste, and maybe we can get a bigger taste the next time out.
Good. It's another good performance or good recording from the back of the band. It's the one that we've chosen for you. The vantage point is
best place to be.
That's the best place to be, is it? In the pocket? And
for this show, it is, yeah.
For the purposes of this show, Reid, Neil, thank you very much for doing this. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening, everybody out there. We hope you enjoyed the series today. Follow Tartantown on Facebook for latest updates on all these events. And these, as a reminder, these files will stay on Facebook, on Tartantown's Facebook page, and they will be on YouTube as well. So thanks again to everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye for now. We will be back.
Cheers.
Thanks.